Let me start again, Veronica. God darn it. Okay. All right. One more time. Hi, everybody. Welcome back. This is Scream Sister. We are a podcast dedicated to Spanish language horror, scary movies, and scary books. I am your host, Valerie.
And I'm Veronica. Almost missed the cue.
And we are back. This is our 10th episode. So we wanted to give a special moment of celebration for our 10 episodes.
Really? It's 10 already?
Yeah. So,
Wow.
I mean, but I mean, it took us a while to get here. So I think we got started back in July. So we've been going since July of this year. And here we are now. By the time this airs, it'll be like last week of November. So it took us a while to get to 10 episodes because we only post every other Monday, but we did it and we're here. And do we know any more about the podcasting process 10 episodes in?
I don't.
Nope. No, we don't.
We are laying the tracks before the train as it chugs down the rail.
Literally. But today we are talking about, I think this might be the oldest film that we've looked at so far, that we've like actually said, okay, we're going to watch this and we're going to devote an episode to it. So not counting like, you know, when we've talked about Night of the Living Dead or Halloween, or when I went on my little path down Nightmare on Elm Street, not counting those. But this is, I think, one of the oldest movies we've looked at. So this one's over 20 years old, and it's one of Guillermo Del Toro's films. So we'll be talking about that here in a little bit. But what I thought we could kind of open up with is talking about Guillermo Del Toro's his work. And so I was telling Ronnie right before we started the show, I embarrassingly, for being the big fan that I am, I haven't seen, it's not true. I've seen a lot of his movies, but I haven't seen all of them. And I haven't seen a lot of like his earlier stuff. And Veronica's actually seen quite a bit. So what we went and found, we found a list of all of his movies ranked from vulture.com. And we're going to be sure to include that in the show notes for you guys.
So yeah, they ranked, and this is not his complete total filmography, I don't think. They listed the top 12, of which I've seen 7, possibly 8. At the number 12 spot is Mimic.
Did you see that?
I did, a long time ago.
I never saw it. I know of it, but I never saw it.
I did see it. I don't remember a whole lot about it, other than it was some sort of bug that could mimic like humans. So, and
I know Mira Sorvino was in it.
Yeah. Coming in at the number 11 spot is Blade 2. And this is where I'm not sure, because I know I've seen a Blade movie. I'm not sure if it was number 2 or not.
I know that I've seen I've seen plenty of the Blade films. I just don't know if I've seen any one of them all the way through. So I don't know. I would have to go back and look.
But again, whenever I saw that Blade movie, whichever one it was also a long time ago. In which I did not know he did a Blade movie. Anyway, coming in at number 10 is Pacific Rim, which I have seen. And in fact, my youngest son, Raphael, this was like his favorite movie for a long time. Everything was Gypsy Danger.
Because I'm completely unfamiliar with Pacific Rim. Walk me through that. What is that one about?
It stars Idris Elba, for one thing. That's enough reason to watch it right there. Well, it's set in like a world that has kaijus, which is, kind of the Japanese word for like Godzilla, those type of big type of monsters. Those are kaijus. And humanity has kind of devised these huge, what are they? They're like suits of armor, like humongous, that they call Jaegers, and that are piloted by 2 people, get in and pilot it and kind of move it around to battle the kaijus. So that's basically what the movie's about.
I am not, but you know why I'm not familiar with this movie? Because it came out in 2013. I had a baby. Like I just fell off the face of the earth. I was firstborn baby land.
Well,
so
my baby loved that movie. Everything was Gypsy Danger, which was the name of the Jaeger suit that, of course, our hero and pilots. All right. And then coming in at number 9 is Hellboy, which I've also seen.
That one. Yeah, I do know that one.
I've seen that one. Coming in at 8, which I'm not familiar with this one at all, Nightmare Alley.
I'm familiar with it only because I think it came out after Shape of Water sometime after Shape of Water. So I just remember like at that point, Shape of Water, he'd already won his Academy Award. So he was already like, things that he did were drawing more attention and more media focus. So like when Nightmare Alley came out, I remember that got a lot of coverage because, Oh, yeah. This is his next project after winning the Academy Award. So, yeah, but I didn't see it. I think that one had Bradley Cooper in it.
Coming in at number 7 is Crimson Peak with Tom Hiddleston, and I forget the name of the actress. This one I have also seen.
Okay, so Jessica Chastain, and then I
Yeah,
forget.
I always want to say Julianne Moore. I get them confused.
No.
Jessica Chastain and Julianne. They're
Not even
redheads.
remotely.
They're
Okay,
kind of both redheads.
Okay, hold on. We have to the woman. We're gonna shame on us for not knowing. Shame on me for not knowing. Crimson Peak. The other woman. Mia Wasikowska. If I'm saying that right, Mia Wasikowska. I know that she did like the Alice in Wonderland
right? With Johnny
movies. I Crimson Peak I love, and I think you said you love it too, right?
Yeah,
or you
I
like
liked
it.
it.
I like the creatures in that movie. His monsters, what he's so known for.
And then coming up at number 6, so halfway through the list, is Hellboy 2, The Golden Army, which I also saw that one.
It was a good one, yeah. This number 5, I haven't seen yet.
I haven't seen either.
Kronos. I think that was his first like major picture.
And then his newest addition to his filmography, Pinocchio, which came out I think just last year, 2022. But I haven't seen that one. Seen that one either. Number 3, Devil's Backbone, which is our movie that we just watched and we'll be talking about in just a minute. Coming in at number 2 was The Shape of Water, which I also have not gotten around to watching yet.
I didn't watch that one either, and I wanted to specifically highlight this part of the article that they say because I think that this was kind of, I thought, like, I can't claim myself a diehard fan, but I can claim this as the reason why I didn't necessarily gravitate towards seeing it. They say, we suspect that for diehard Del Toro fans, The Shape of Water is probably not among your favorite films from his filmography. And they put in parentheses, it's a little too polished and accessible. After all, part of Del Toro's charm is that, like his characters, he operates on the margins. I am a fan, but I can't call myself a diehard fan. But I think that movie had like Octavia Spencer and a couple of other people. So it struck me as more like, I guess, just like mainstream, more Hollywood. So I didn't necessarily gravitate towards seeing it.
Did it have romance as a big?
It does have romance.
You know me, that would turn me off right away.
And the number one.
Yes, the number one, Pan's Labyrinth, which I have also watched. It's gorgeous movie.
Beautiful movie. Yeah. Beautiful creatures. I like one of the things that I really gravitate towards Guillermo Del Toro for is his monsters. His creations are just so horrifying but interesting and in many ways really beautiful to look at. And my goal in storytelling, I just want to be able to create creatures like him. Like I just find the stuff that he dreams up very inspiring. So if I can dream up a monster that I think is at that level, I will have done really, really well for myself. I will be very proud of myself. So that's my goal. He's my goal when it comes to creating monsters. That can take us right into talking about our film. We are talking about 2001's El Espinazo del Diablo, or The Devil's Backbone, directed by Guillermo Del Toro. And so that's the film that came in at number 3 on the list. And so this one stars Marisa Paredes, Eduardo Noriega, Federico Lupe, if I'm saying that right, who also is in Kronos, which came out in 1993. And then Fernando Dielve as Carlos. Yeah, as Carlos. Then here's a brief blurb on the film. So this is what I found online. After Carlos, a young boy whose father has died in the Spanish Civil War, after he arrives at an ominous boys' orphanage, he discovers the school is haunted and has many dark secrets, which he must uncover. Just the typical warning that we do for everybody before we start. We are about to discuss this movie fully with spoilers, so if you haven't seen it yet and you want to, it's available over on Amazon Prime right now, so you can rent it there.
And it's only 99 cents. At least in the States. For me, it was 99 cents. Was it not for you?
Because I did it through Apple TV, so it was $3.99 over there. Go to Prime, people.
Boo on you.
But you know what? Like, I rented it, and then immediately after watching it, I was like, I should have bought it. I like this movie. I should have bought it. But anyway, so you can rent it there. Definitely worth a watch. And probably any good Del Toro fan needs to be familiar with this movie. As we just saw, it's number 3 on the list. So you should know this movie if you haven't. Give it a look if you haven't seen it yet, and then come back and listen to this episode. Ron, we both watched this last night, so I want to know how you liked it, but then also if you can kind of help us. There's a lot of characters in this movie, so if you can, and I can help you, but let's like run through who people are, so because there's a lot of names to know. So,
Okay.
but how did you
Sure.
like it?
I liked it. It was nothing like I thought it was going to be. I remember this movie coming out and the name of it, and I don't know why I thought it was going to be something like The Hills Have Eyes.
I don't
That's what
even
I thought it
remember
was going
this
to be.
coming out. I have no memory of this at
Yeah, I
all.
thought it was going to be something like that, something like a cross between The Hills Have Eyes and Deliverance.
Oh, okay.
So I kind of always steered away from it. But anyway, so this was nothing like that. It's a ghost story, essentially.
Mhm.
So it's not like super high on the horror, for me
Mhm.
anyway. It's
Yeah.
not super high on horror. It's just more ghost, more suspenseful. But I really enjoyed it. I
Yeah.
thought, in keeping with Guillermo del Toro's brand, very atmospheric. He always does a great job of kind of creating this atmospheric setting that kind of has undertones of, something deeper is going on. Loved all the muted colors that they use, which kind of helped create that kind of vintage photograph almost
Yeah.
aesthetic. And I loved all the little boys.
Yeah. Okay.
I
So
just loved them all.
there's Carlos. There's Carlos, right?
Carlos.
And then
Yeah, he's our entry into this orphanage. Like
and then there's
the
other little boys that are like worth knowing, but like the other main boy that comes into play, I think his name is Jaime.
Jaime.
The one who we perceive as
The
kind of
tall
being
one.
the oldest. Yeah, the oldest of the bunch, Jaime. There's Carmen, the principal or the headmistress.
Mm-hmm.
There's the doctor, who I think his name is Casares. Dr.
Casares.
Casares. And then there's Conchita, who I love, and I think
I missed her name.
we'll get to that, but yeah, I thought she got the shaft.
Jacinto.
Jacinto, yes. The best.
Can we say the words? Can we say the words to describe him?
Who else am I forgetting, though? Who else?
That was
I
it
think
kind of for the main. I mean, we're introduced briefly to Ayala. He's one of the men that drops Carlos off, that Carlos refers to him as his tutor, but he's
As
just
his
there.
tutor.
He's just there
Yeah.
briefly. Yeah, there's Jacinto's two henchmen, but they're not around. I mean, one of them's called Pig. They call him Pig.
Yeah.
But they're not really around. But I think for major characters, we've covered it.
I agree with you. The visuals of this movie, there's another article that we pulled for this movie that kind of talks about the kind of old Western type vibes that this film had, in terms of aesthetics. Of the movies I've seen and enjoyed the most on that list, it's definitely been the stuff that I guess is veered more towards like horror-centric stuff. So even though I've seen the Hellboy movies, and I liked them, Pan's Labyrinth is definitely more of a favorite of mine. This is more of like kind of a ghost story, but also kind of like a murder mystery. So just to kind of give everybody kind of like just a little background of this, it like I mentioned, set during the Spanish Civil War, which I think was like the late 30s. So when this film opens up, it's at some point in time in the late 1930s. So the film opens with like a bomb dropping from a plane, and then it kind of pans to a little boy laying on the ground bleeding. And and we'll come to learn that this little boy's name is Santi. And I remember watching it and thinking, oh, well, somehow he got injured from the bomb that fell from the plane or something like that. Like I correlated the two. But anyway, yeah, it opens with the mysterious death of this little boy at this orphanage. And then it kind of flashes forward to the present day of this time period where Carlos is getting dropped off at the orphanage.
Carlos's father has been killed in the Spanish Civil War.
As I think a lot of the little boys there at the orphanage, maybe like either their parents were off fighting or their parents had been killed somehow. So it's not long after that Carlos starts hearing things and seeing things and realizing that the place is haunted and there's a ghost there. Like I said, a little boy named Santi, who is the boy that we saw at the beginning of the film. So one of the things I had said we would talk about, Ron, like in terms of, because this is a movie that's like over 20 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I was going to be curious to learn in watching it was like whether or not it kind of still stacks up and kind of still holds up as like a truly scary or creepy film. And I think it did. What do you think?
I definitely do. And
Sorry,
maybe
that's
that's because it's a ghost story, and like you said, a little bit of a murder mystery. What happened to Santi, who did that to him, if anyone. So I think those are kind of like the little black dress. It's just timeless, it's classic. So yes, I definitely think it still holds up and it's still relevant.
So from a standpoint of creature wise, the ghost of Santi, that's kind of what I was going to be curious about, because I was like, well, this is an earlier film in his career when maybe the budget wasn't there, special effects might not have been there. I was kind of curious to see how this was going to hold up. Visually, visually speaking, Santi the ghost is still, in my opinion, very scary and creepy to look at.
I think wisely they did not like overuse the
Mm-hmm.
visuals of him. Sometimes you just see his like a shadow moving. So I think that was a
Yeah.
good choice to not like overly rely on always showing you the visual of Santi.
Right. And
Full
he kind of has like a murky underwater look to him that tracks, because we will come to learn later on in the film that he essentially got thrown into some sort of water pit in the school's basement or underground, and he got left to drown. So, he's got, anytime you see him in the film, he's got blood floating in the air from his head wound, and it's kind of floating around him as it would in water. And so I thought that was really interestingly done. And talking about the effects of that, there's a review from Roger Ebert that came out when this movie came out. Roger Ebert gave it, I think, like 3 stars. I don't know out of what. I don't know what Roger Ebert's rating is.
Well, he gave it thumbs up. Like, if I remember that show, Siskel and Ebert, it was always thumbs up or thumbs. So he gave it a thumbs up.
He gave it a thumbs up. But he writes, this is from Roger Ebert's review that came out in 2001. Any director of a ghost film is faced with the difficult question of portraying the ghost. A wrong step and he gets bad laughs. So to your point, what you're saying is like, if you show it, like, kind of like the movie Jaws, like if it's not there, you're either going to not get the reaction you want, or you're going to, it's going to go completely the opposite way. So he said, the ghost in The Devil's Backbone is glimpsed briefly. You hear it, and finally when you see it, you understand him a little bit better as a dead boy. What happens at the end is not the usual action scene with which lesser ghost films dissipate their tension, but a chain of events that have a logic and poetic justice. I thought that was interesting. He actually says The Devil's Backbone has been compared to the others and has the same ambition and intelligence. The others is great. I like the others.
Yeah, I like that movie too. I think that's a good comparison.
So what did you think of Jacinto, our villain? Who I didn't understand, like initially, Ron, I didn't get that he was, I guess he's like the janitor or the caretaker.
Some sort of grounds
person, dude.
I
And so like as the film's progressing and we're seeing just how nasty this man is, I was just thinking, I was like, what is this man's role at this school? Like, why is he there?
It's a very bare bones orphanage, or school, whatever.
Kind of looks like a mission. Yeah.
Yeah, because there's just him. There's Conchita, who I'm assuming does. And then there's a cook who did we even see her up until the very end when she's fighting the fire?
Right. Yeah.
Like, I don't remember seeing her at any other point in the movie. And then Dr. Casares and Carmen. So like 5 adults basically that
out
are
of this
kind of
this huge like compound looking space. Yeah. Like a mission, kind of like a Spanish mission.
But I didn't know what his role was going to be at first, but it doesn't take long before you kind of start seeing that he's just not a nice person.
And he used to be a boy at the
and that's
orphanage.
The thing is, like, he used to be an orphan in that place. So you would think, right, that he would have more compassion for the orphans that are currently there, but he's kind of the biggest bully of them all, kind of terrorizes them. And I don't know, maybe it's because he sees himself in them, and isn't that kind of human nature to kind of despise in others what we don't like about ourselves? So if, it's kind of self-hatred turned outward.
I mean, we never get his backstory. We never, me, I always like an origin story, but we never really find out, like, what's his deal? Why are you such a butthole? Like, I don't know.
Does he just feel like the world has wronged him because he grew up in an orphanage? Well, dude, you're not the only one,
And so his function there, guys, is that he's working there obviously, but he has an ulterior motive. He's looking for, they have gold on the premises, and I wasn't entirely clear, like bars of gold. And I gathered that this was gold that they were going to use to fund the cause. Is that my understanding?
Right, because again, the movie's set during the Civil War, so which lasted from 1936 to 1939. I don't know that it was ever outright stated, but my perception was that, like, Carmen and Dr. Casares are on the side, because there were 2 sides to the Spanish Civil War, the Nationals and then the Republicans. The Nationals were kind of like your right-wing conservative, fighting for traditional values, kind of monarchists, and then your Republicans were kind of more your left, what I guess we would now call kind of more left-wing, pro-democracy kind of people. So and again, I don't know if this was ever outright stated in the movie, Valerie, I may have missed it.
I don't think so.
My interpretation was that Carmen and Dr. Casares are on the side of the Republicans. So like the leftists, the pro-democracy.
Yeah, because they kept, I think at least once or twice they kept saying the left. So I gather like that's the side. Yeah.
So they've got, I don't know how they came upon having these all these gold bars, but yeah, they're using that to funnel to their cause.
Their cause, right?
But based on conversations that Carmen and Dr. Casares have, it doesn't sound like things are going well for their cause, which would track, of course, with history and the Spanish Civil War, because obviously the Nationals came out on top of that. And that led into Francisco Franco's, near 40-year authoritarian regime, which actually lasted until he died in 1975. So this was, a thing that within my lifetime was still, my early lifetime was still going on. So, so at this point, things are not going well for the Republican side.
So that's what his ulterior motive is there. He's just an opportunist who's trying to find that gold to take and I don't know, do whatever with. I don't know. He's just looking for money to flee. And I think he also just is like, he has a lot of pent up hatred towards the place. We never really learn why, but he really just wants to, I think at one point he even says as much to Conchita, who he is like posing as her fiance. I don't know if that romance is ever genuine given how much he portrays
Not from
her
his
in the
side.
end. Yeah.
Not from his side anyway.
But
from hers, yes.
But yeah, they're like supposed to be engaged. And so I guess he like is fooling her into thinking that he wants to start anew and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, because she's talking about how they're going to go start a farm. And he doesn't really strike me as I'm going to be a farmer type person.
He just looks like a sleaze, like from the get-go. A very good looking sleaze. Don't get me wrong. Very handsome man.
It was a shame.
I remember wondering at like one of the earlier parts of the film, if Jaime, who is, like we said, the taller boy in the orphanage, we kind of perceive him as being the older one. I kind of wondered at the beginning of the film if he was the one who might have killed Santi. But
it was framed that way to kind of lead you to believe. And then, he's initially kind of coming across as a bit of a bully himself. So then you're thinking,
In flashback, we kind of see what really happened that night. And so that is where we learn that Jacinto not only is just this terrible human who treats everybody like crap, but he also is the one who slapped Santi around and basically killed him that night. And Jaime happened to be out with Santi in the basement. They were like looking for slugs, collecting slugs. And when what's his face? Jacinto like chases Santi over to the water. Jaime like hides. Jacinto has no idea that he's down there also. And then so like he's witnessing Jacinto
everything.
Kill Santi and then go and grab rope, tie him up and essentially throw him into this water. And what was really heartbreaking, Veronica, is like we learned this earlier in the film when Jaime accidentally falls in the water and the boys are like, he doesn't know how to swim. And so then Carlos jumps in to save Jaime. We learned that earlier in the film so that then when this flashback happens and we learn what happened to Santi, it's all the more heartbreaking because we know Jaime couldn't swim. So he couldn't jump in to save his friend. He just had to stand there and watch this little boy be killed and watch him be thrown in the water and drowned. So it was really terrible.
Well, in my headcanon, I choose to believe that Santi died of his head wound before he got pitched into the water so that he did. Because that's my like, if you ask me what's the worst way you can die, what's your worst fear of how you might die, it would be drowning because it's slow and it's happening.
That's interesting.
So that would be heartbreaking.
What about like, do you ever, I remember I used to have this question when I was little. I may have even have asked you this question when I was little because I know I asked it of like people for a while when I was a little girl. I was like, would you rather die? I was like, what is scarier to you or what is worse to you, to die by fire or to die from like the cold, like hypothermia? What would be, in your opinion, what is worse?
I think fire, because my understanding of dying from hypothermia is you just kind of go off to sleep.
Go to sleep,
yeah. You just go to sleep and you don't ever wake up.
Yeah.
Whereas fire hurts. I mean, I'm sure being cold, you know me, I'm always cold and it's not pleasant. But of those two, both suck. Let me just be clear, both suck. But I think fire would be the worst way to go of those two options.
Fire and drowning, yes, I agree. Drowning is a terrible way to go. So let's talk about Dr. Casares.
He was a man, because, he's a man he's a doctor, obviously. So he's there to kind of look after the boys and very kind, it seemed like a very fair man in dealing with the boys, a man who recites poetry. So he's kind of like
a poet.
Yeah, kind of, holding on to this little piece of beauty in the midst of this ugly civil war. Yeah, I liked him a lot.
And he's in love with Carmen. He's
in
love,
which is kind of unrequited, it seems, because it didn't seem like she was really reciprocating.
Yeah, so Carmen, who we said is the headmistress or the principal of the school. Yeah, they're an older lady, older man, and so he just has this unrequited affection for her and loyalty to her, and so he kind of just, by the end of the film, just being one of my favorite characters. And at the end of this movie, in one of the articles that Ronnie and I are going to include for you guys in show notes, they talk a little bit about, where do I have it listed? Hang on one second, guys. Where is it? Hang on. Let me find it first.
Do,
We'll edit
do,
this out.
do, 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 do,
We'll edit
do.
this out. Okay, well, I don't know where I have it. I can't find it
What are you
now,
wanting to say?
Well, so it's the article that kind of talks about like Del Toro sort of. There's a lot of his love for westerns, like old westerns that are kind of make for the aesthetics of this movie. So John Wayne's The Searchers, he specifically talks about that movie as being an inspiration for this movie. And he says, and I had the quote somewhere and I can't find it, but somewhere he says something to, and I'm paraphrasing now because I don't have the damn quote, but he says something to the effect of like, that last shot of the Devil's Backbone is probably one of my most favorite shots that I've ever done, because it's a direct reference to The Searchers, you know, the old man in the door frame of this,
The door frame.
of this, whatever, wherever they are, looking out onto the quote unquote Wild West. If you've watched this movie, then you know that, like, yes, he makes a direct reference to this at the end of the movie. Also, like the bloodied old man making his last stand. We're talking about Dr. Caceres now, at essentially, you know, the highest window in the school, or, you know, visually what we might look at as like a quote unquote watchtower. So that's where he goes to take his last stand, where he's going to defend the grounds of the school, and he's going to prepare to fight until the bitter end, which he does.
I do want to talk about these little boys. So yeah, we have Carlos, who's kind of our entry into this orphanage. We kind of arrive there and we're kind of learning about it as he learns about it. There's Jaime again, who initially comes off like he's going to be the bully, and then he's got like his right hand dude, which I didn't catch his name. And then we have Galvez, and we have Owl, who hasn't talked in I don't know how long and doesn't utter a word throughout this movie. I was like, don't kill Owl. We have Jaime's kind of character arc, I guess you can call it, because he, you know, he's kind of in there giving Carlos hell and instigating things. And Carlos, even though he has a few opportunities to kind of rat Jaime out as the instigator, never does. And then, of course, like Valerie mentioned, when Jaime falls into that pit of water, which I'm not sure why it's there,
or even where that is. Like,
yeah,
what is
why?
that?
What is its purpose? Or maybe that's their water source. I don't know, but gross, because there's
Gross.
a dead person in there now. But anyway, when Jaime falls in and he can't swim, Carlos jumps in and saves him, and kind of that's the turning point in their relationship. And then we find out that Jaime's a bit of an artist. You know, he wants to, his dream is to draw comics. And then I also loved how, you know, at the end of the movie, because Jacinto, being the dirtbag that he is, he kind of sets the place on fire. He leaves a bunch of gas cans, sets it on fire. It blows up, killing Carmen, the cook lady, who I didn't even know was there up until that point. Quite a few of the boys also. None of our main named boys,
people,
thankfully, but kills a lot of the boys. Mortally injures Dr. Casares, which we don't know at that point. And then Jacinto and his two henchmen kind of lock all the boys up in a room. The boys know, or at least Hyman knows, that they're not getting out of this alive. That this is when he tells them all that Jacinto was the one who killed Santi, so he's probably going to kill all of them. They're not going to get out. So they decide to kind of put their history lesson. They had a history lesson earlier with Carmen, you know, where it showed kind of prehistoric men banding together to bring down a big mammoth. And so the boys, that's what they decide to do. They're going to...
I didn't pick up on any of that. What was I doing?
It was a brief scene there in the classroom. That's when we kind of see Jacinto's drawing. He's drawing in class, and that's when Carlos tells him, you can draw pictures and I can write. So
stories.
That's when, at this point, Dr. Casares has passed away. He's died up,
he's
you know,
bled out or whatever,
at his watch post. But his ghost comes and lets them out, which I thought was just really touched my heart.
We didn't even talk about Conchita and what happens to this woman.
Oh, yeah.
So after the explosion, after Jacinto sets off that explosion with the gas tanks and whatnot, the remaining people who are still alive gather together, and she says, you know, if I walk all day and all night, I will get there to whatever the next village for help. I'll get there by noon. So she takes off on...
the first idea that we have of how far out in the middle of nowhere this orphanage is.
Yeah. They're like, it truly looks like the Wild West. When you look at images of everything outside of the grounds of this school, it looks like just nothing. They're out in the middle of nowhere. So she sets off on foot and has been walking, whatever, I don't know, like a night passes or something. She's walking into the next day on the dirt road, and on comes this car, and lo and behold, it's freaking Jacinto and his henchmen, because he takes off after he does that. After he sets the explosion, he takes off. So he's on his way back, I guess, to finish the job. And so he confronts Conchita, who at this point
sees him for what he is,
knows he's a monster, and he gets in front of her and he's like, they're watching, just say you're sorry and get in the truck. And she's like, I'm not afraid of you. She says it multiple times and he pulls out a knife and is threatening her. He's like, say you're sorry, they're watching. And she refuses. And so he freaking stabs her in the side and kills her. And I'm like watching this and I was like, you bastard.
I know. I was like, oh, please have a good, not a good end, but a horrific end that
right. I was like,
is deserving of your.
You better get what's coming to you and then some, because you're a piece of crap.
I'm sure that there's probably some symbolism in that exchange that they have, being that this is the Spanish Civil War. I'm sure there's probably some sort of metaphor going on there between the left side, the Republicans not giving in, going down to the last. But it probably certainly went over my head. And a lot of American audiences' heads. But I'm sure, as I'm sure there's symbolism between the unexploded bomb that lands. It's kind of this thing that's ticking, because I think one of the boys even says
that is an interesting thing. And I guess I didn't mention that at the top. Yeah, like at the top. So we open on the scene of the bomb being dropped from this plane.
There's consequences coming that we don't know yet.
That we don't know yet. That's a good point. Yeah, I never mentioned, guys, the bomb doesn't go off. The bomb gets dropped, but it doesn't go off. So, but yeah, the whole time Jaime is like, I don't believe it. I think if you put your ear to it, you can hear its heartbeat. You can hear it still ticking. So that's an excellent metaphor. Is like there's some unknown consequence in the air that is yet to come. The ending is where we see the little boys they've killed Jacinto. They've dropped him into that water.
They've given him to Santi.
Because Santi said, bring me Jacinto. I want Jacinto. And so they do that. And Santi in that way has his justice. The little boys just have to go out there into the
I wanted to know what happens to them. I mean, we know from
several of them are limping. I'm like, they need
poor Galvez.
They need medical attention.
Poor Galvez reminds me of Gavroche in Les Mis.
They're so small. They're so little.
And we know it's a day and a half or more trek for an adult. So you can imagine for little
who's not injured.
I want to know what happens to all these little boys. But that's where the movie ends. It's that wonderfully framed shot of the ghost of Dr. Casares kind of standing in the door frame, although we just see, I think, like his torso, and the little boys, walking down, and Jaime's carrying Owl on his back.
Yes. Okay, hang on. That reminds me, because before we move on from this, gosh darn it, find the quotes, Valerie.
Several years later.
Hold on. Okay, I must have. Okay, hang on. Maybe I can find it in my document notes. I'm so mad at myself. I feel like I'm missing a sheet. But it was the opening of the movie, Veronica, which opens with a voiceover, and we come to learn it's Dr. Casares. And I thought that the monologue, if you will, of that was so beautiful that I had purposely.
And then he bookends it at the end.
He bookends the movie with that monologue, and I thought it was so beautiful. I wanted to make sure we said it, and then now I don't have it in front of me. Pues entonces, I don't know if you're able to find the quote on your feet, Veronica. I don't have it.
Okay, here it is. The opening voiceover words of The Devil's Backbone. What is a ghost? A tragedy condemned to repeat itself time and again. A moment of pain, perhaps. Something dead which still seems to be alive. An emotion suspended in time, like a blurred photograph, like an insect trapped in amber.
See, it's so beautiful. I loved it. Yeah, you're right. He bookends the movie with that passage, and I thought that was really lovely.
I did, just out of curiosity, because I was curious why the movie was named The Devil's Backbone. And I know that Dr. Casares in there somewhere, because he's got jars of dead infants, in jars of. I mean, I'm sure maybe it wasn't formaldehyde, but something to preserve them. And he talks about how, I guess, the devil's backbone is because it was an exposed spine.
Yeah, I
gathered it was supposed to be like some sort of genetic abnormality. And so I looked it up because I thought, is this a real thing? I couldn't find anything about it being like an actual genetic abnormality or deformity, but it is a plant. There is a plant called the devil's backbone, and there's a geographical thing in Texas that's called, and there's also one in West Virginia, but I couldn't find anything about, so that might be just something made up for the movie, I guess, because he says the lore in the movie's world, the devil's backbone, I guess the lore is that it's a mark of an unwanted child or something like that, so that I guess since this is an orphanage, maybe
I thought it was like something like that. There was lore that it was like I guess you're right. An unwanted child. I guess in my brain, I was reading that as like a child that they feel is like destined to be evil or something like that. But it is a plant, you said. So that's interesting.
And the name of some geographic, what's the word?
I don't know. I don't know what you're saying.
Geographic, like a geographic
Region?
the geographic
Well,
feature.
okay.
Yeah, like a geographic feature, like a land
Okay.
in the landscape. There's one in Texas that has that name, and there's a place apparently in West Virginia.
Okay. Well, we'll have to like include, maybe we can include some links to photos of that stuff for you guys so you know what the Devil's Backbone is, at least here in Texas. So that's cool. If you go over to criterion.com, and I'll link this for you guys, they called The Devil's Backbone, quote, one of the most personal films by Guillermo Del Toro and among his most frightening and emotionally layered. He expertly combines gothic ghost story, murder mystery, and historical melodrama that, like his later Pan's Labyrinth, reminds us that the scariest monsters are often the human ones. Okay, so earlier this week, guys, and when I say earlier this week, it might have been like yesterday. I don't remember. I've lost track of time, but sometime in the recent past, I sent Veronica this article that I will make sure to link for you guys, but it's Who's Afraid of the Big Bad Bruja? Why Many Latinos Love the Macabre, exploring the fascinating link between Latine culture and the horror genre. Now, Veronica and I have talked about this topic on the show here before. It's kind of like one of the things that birthed this show for us was the relationship that Latine culture has to the horror genre in full. So as I was reading through this article, I swear I was like, have we already shared this? But we haven't, because it just came out like last month. So
yeah, you've talked about how we make up a big
a lot of the
percentage
same
of the audience.
Exactly. It covers a lot of the same stuff that we've already talked about. So that's why it feels so repetitive to me, because we've already talked about it. But just to sort of let you guys know, there are some good things. Definitely read this article in full for more. It talks about Guillermo Del Toro, for one, as being one of the names that have like become big exploring creatures of darkness. They specifically also reference satanic Hispanics, which we've talked about on this show briefly before. We haven't watched it yet. It is now streaming, everybody, so you can go and watch it, and so can Ronnie and I. And so there will be an episode coming up on that one, I'm sure. But this year, a new horror anthology, Satanic Hispanics, tells tales of terror across different regions of Latin America. And then you've got, your latest installments of the Scream franchise, which up until very recently starred Melissa Barrera and Jenna Ortega. Just more from the article. They talk about like the relationship of like religion and horror. Not all Latine Christians are Catholic, but Catholicism itself has deeply rooted history in Latin America. And we've talked about this before on how that kind of component makes its way into horror films and has for decades. So it's not anything new. So definitely give this article a read. They also talk about like how horror draws on Latino cultural traditions. So, La Llorona, El Chupacabra. I didn't realize this, but this year, Universal Halloween Horror Nights offered up a haunted house entirely centered around these myths, Veronica. It was called Monstruos, the Monsters of Latin America, which sounds amazing, and I wish that I could see that. So they also talk about like horror as social allegory, which kind of like got me thinking, because a lot of the horror movies that you and I have looked at so far, Veronica, this year, or since we've started this show, in a lot of them, both in films and some of the books we've read, there's the real life horror going on in the background of a lot of these stories. So I kind of feel like it's a way of processing our collective grief, our past traumas. And so maybe even through horror, we are also allowed to envision different outcomes, and perhaps like in certain cases, more just outcomes. So like in the case of La Llorona, Veronica and I looked at Jairo Bustamante's La Llorona this year. We have an episode on that movie. It was a really great movie, but kind of re-envisioning a more just ending to the real life atrocities that movie kind of touches on. So I think it was an interesting read, and it just sort of further drives home the point that we've been saying all along, that, Latinos are big on horror for a variety of reasons. We're not a monolith. There's no one reason why we're big on horror, but there's definitely box office numbers to back that up. So give that article a read. Yeah, definitely, like reading through it, I was like, I swear we've talked about this, but we have talked. It's because we have talked about this. We've talked about it a lot, but it bears repeating because new people find the show all the time. So if you don't know what we're about, that's what we're about.
What I was going to ask you is, of the 3 movies that kind of have that more stylistic and kind of horror-esque vibe to them of his movies, Pan's Labyrinth, Crimson Peak, and The Devil's Backbone, how would you rate those?
Ooh, so Pan's Labyrinth was my first movie of his to see. And so
Mhm.
that one, and it's been a long time since I've seen it. So, but I feel like that one I have to rank number one just because it was the first one I saw. It was visually nothing like it that I had seen at the time. And so Crimson Peak would come along much, much later. And in watching that movie, I remember watching Pan's Labyrinth and being genuinely scared and horrified at what I
Mhm.
was looking at. And then by the time Crimson Peak came around, I was like, well, this is quintessential Del Toro. Like I'm expecting this. What a beautiful, horrifying creature to behold. I was no longer like terrified by it. I was more or less just like amazed by the creatures. I was like, look at this. I really liked this movie. I really like The
Mhm.
Devil's Backbone. I might have to stick that ahead of Crimson Peak because I
Oh,
just
then we have the same ranking because I was going to say
okay.
the same. I was going to say Pan's Labyrinth definitely number one.
But this
Devil's
one
Backbone
really,
and
yeah, I
Crimson Peak.
really liked this one a lot, and enough that this is the first one out of all the movies we've done so far that I went back and watched it like morning of our recording, like knowing that we were going to record later today. I turned it on just to have it on. So
I also think I like, even though I shouldn't like it, the way the ending of both Pan's Labyrinth and The Devil's Backbone, they kind of still leave you with unanswered questions.
yeah,
I want to know what happens to the boys. Who's going to take care of them? Who's going to love them? And then, of course, Pan's Labyrinth.
yeah.
Did she die? Was she really?
Well, so I had
Was
to go
she
back.
really of that fairy tale world?
I had
Was
to
that
go back.
real?
Yeah, I had to go back and look at the ending because I remember thinking I initially I was like, well, at least this ending ended with them alive, unlike Pan's Labyrinth. But then I remembered how Pan's Labyrinth ends, and I was like, well, but does she die? Like maybe she just was always meant to live in that quote unquote underworld or whatever, and maybe that is a happy ending. It's just not her alive in the human world, in the living world, I should say.
Mhm.
So we talked about that article. We'll link it for you guys. You guys take a look at it. Also, we want to remind everyone that the next Scream Sister Book Club book has been chosen. Ronnie mentioned it on the last episode. We're reading Peñata by Leopoldo Gaup. Leopoldo, am I saying it right? Gout?
Leopoldo Gaup.
Yeah. Yeah. So we'll be discussing that book on the show in January. And the reason we're telling you about it now is because the point of book club is we want to invite you guys to read these books along with us. So read Peñata with us and then share your thoughts on it. So we can mention that on the episode. Full disclosure, Ronnie and I are not professional book reviewers. I don't think you would want us to be
Did
professional
anybody
book
think we were?
reviewers.
Did anybody think we were?
I don't know.
We're
but,
not
like, just
professional anything.
don't be fooled. We barely know what we're talking about on a good day. We are just people who are taking on these new to us books. These are books we've not read before. And a lot of times we don't even necessarily like read stuff ahead of time to find out. Like we go in blind. We take on these books and then we talk about how we liked them or what we thought about them. And that's it. So please don't take anything that we have too seriously. Take it all with a grain of salt. Your
It's
takes
just
may
our opinion.
Yep. And your takes may be very different from ours. And that's excellent because if you share your takes with us, then we get to bring other perspectives to the book club shows, which is what we want to be doing. So definitely read with us and be part of the conversation with us.
Yeah,
Ron,
absolutely. And actually, that reminds me when I was kind of looking up just to kind of get a general idea, because certainly, I'm not a history major I'm not an expert in the history of my own country, much less the history of someone else's country. But when I was just kind of looking up, like when the years of the Spanish Civil War, I came across like some quotes that are attributed to Francisco Franco, who was the Spanish general who came out on top and ruled over Spain up until 1975. One of his quotes was, which gives you an idea maybe of where his headspace was, there can be no room for dissent in a nation's development.
no.
No. I mean, yeah, just no. So we welcome dissent, all
Yes.
opinions, as long as you're constructive, as long as you're kind in expressing it, because one man's trash is another man's treasure. Something
Yes.
I don't like, a trope I hate might be a trope that you love, and vice versa.
Yes.
And so art is subjective. Books, plays, movies, they're all subjective. And
Yes.
so just because we may not like something or just because we may love something doesn't mean that you hold that same opinion.
Yes.
So we invite all voices.
And please don't ever not pick up a book because we said we didn't like it. Like that would be such a mistake. Please always, if a book sparks your interest, go for it. Go in blind.
Actually, because I belong to Goodreads, although I'm not as active as I used to be, but I still go on there to like read reviews of books that I'm considering. And I always I'm not just looking for the reviews from people who love it. In fact, I don't put a lot of stock in reviewers that I know give everything 4 or 5 stars, because nobody loves everything, right? It's just, maybe you do, but I just don't put I don't lend a lot of credence to those reviews. I look for people that can look at something critically and say, because I want to know, what they thought of the pacing, or what they thought of the characterization or the plot. Because sometimes in those they're not negative, but people that are not afraid to point out,
like constructive criticism.
yeah, constructive criticism, like what they thought could be better,
Yeah.
also informs me. It helps me make a decision on whether I want to invest in the money to buy a certain book,
Yeah.
as opposed to maybe renting it from not renting it, borrowing it from the library.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
So sometimes those constructive critical thoughts give me more information than from someone who's just blindly saying, "Oh, I loved it. It was great."
Yeah.
All the time.
So definitely know that you guys, we encourage you to share your takes with us. Ron, is there anything aside from book club book? Is there anything else that you're tackling right now in the book realm or show realm, whatever you're taking in?
I've been reading more lately, but I've been reading just like some historical, mysteries, just as kind of something light reading.
Well, I did want to mention to everybody, I have been working my way through Killers of the Flower Moon by David Gran, and I did finally finish that. And it was one of those books, Ron. I was in the car parked waiting for one of my kids to get out of school and reading it. And so I finished it. I closed the book. I just like sat there, and I think I just let out like this like audible sigh, and I just like stared off out the window and just stared off into space, lost in thought. The book just like sat with me like that after I finished it. So I really liked it. I'm really glad that I gave it a read, just because, like I think I said on one of the previous episodes, this was history I was not at all familiar with. And so it's a really tragic story. The full title of the book is Killers of the Flower Moon, The Osage Murders and the Birth of the FBI. So it's kind of almost like 2 books crammed into one. The book itself is not super big, but 2 different stories there. And so,
are you going to watch the movie?
I am, but I might wait to stream it, just because I can't. Like, I know I will have to get up to pee, and I can't. I hate having to go to the bathroom in the middle of movies, just because it's just like, especially a movie like this. Like, there's no way that I'm going to be happy to miss any part of this movie to go pee. So I may just have to wait until it comes to streaming.
See, that's why I've been reading just kind of like my safe historical mysteries, where there's always an answer to everything, and there's a closure. I've just not been in the headspace for anything super heavy.
Well, and that is
or
the
depressing.
Thing that is the thing to know. So this is obviously this is a tragic story, and it's certainly hard to come away from it feeling like there's any sense of justice, because for one, like the members of this particular family, this Osage family, waited for years for any semblance of justice. People in the family died not ever, knowing the truth about what happened to their family members. So and for everyone covered in this book, there is, and he talks about it in the book, there is an untold number of other Osage people whose deaths were not classified as mysterious or homicides or what have you, were not investigated. So like, God only knows, God only knows what the true number is of Osage people who were murdered for these nefarious plots. So it's heavy content. And so take that into consideration if you're going to tackle this book. From a writing standpoint, the reading is very accessible. It flows well. I didn't do this as an Audible book, but I imagine this might be an Audible book that this is the kind of thing you listen to, then you might be able to get through that and enjoy that. So, but just know that this is heavy content. It is a true story, obviously. It's a tragic story, and it's a story where it's like there's not necessarily closure at the end. You're just going to come away with knowledge that you may not have had before. So whether you read the book or you watch the movie or you do both, my 2 cents, I really am glad that I read this book, and I would recommend this book to anybody that wants to give it a read. And that's my spiel.
So on Goodreads, every year they have their, I don't know what they call it, but their choice awards, basically, where, readers nominate.
I heard about this. Yeah.
It's a popularity contest. So, but in the first round, both Vampires of El Norte and Our Share of Night, which 2 books that we've read, are both. I do not expect either one to make it into the next round, but
Oh, yeah.
they were at least were in there in the first round.
In the first round. Yeah.
So
Yeah. I think it was Mariana Enriquez who said something similar to what I was saying earlier about how like a lot of maybe there's something to be said for one of the reasons Latine culture taps into horror so much is because of the ways in which it kind of gives us an outlet to process some of our real life trauma and pain. I think she's made similar comments in the past in interviews and stuff, just sort of talking about how like Latine horror often draws on real life horrors of the culture and our history. So just FYI, we'll be digging around for a movie to watch for upcoming episodes, movies. So be on the lookout for those. This is a perfect opportunity for me to plug. Usually, if we're not announcing this stuff on the show, we're announcing this stuff on social media. So if you are, first of all, know that you can always find us at screamsister.com on www.screamsister.com. And then you can find us on Instagram and Threads at Scream Sister. We're over on YouTube at Scream Sister Pod. And then you can always email us, screamsisterpod@gmail.com. So yeah, we will for sure be posting. We're also on TikTok, and I don't know where we are on TikTok. We will be posting on all of those places. We'll remind you that we're reading Piñata, that's our book. And then we will also notify you about what the next movie that we're going to be talking about on the show will be. So
if you have any movies to recommend,
yes, we welcome your recommendations. So
books
definitely
or movies.
Books or movies. Or shows, whatever floats your boat, send it our way. And that's it. Thanks, everybody. We don't have a sign off, but we'll see you next time.
Oh, gosh.
All right, bye.
All right.
Scream Sister is a Nest production hosted by me, Valerie, and Veronica. Editing by me. Music by Omar Chakor. Production support for this episode provided by Lorenzo Villarreal and Alex Street. Listen to new episodes of Scream Sister every other Monday, and don't forget to give us a rate and review. It is the best way to help us grow.